So it's really fun messing around with Ableton's MIDI features. It kind of lets you manipulate MIDI, and the main issue I've always found with this is that sometimes it can be hard to get a result that you want, or to just kind of feel like you're pressing buttons and getting a lot of random or chaotic results, especially when you're generating MIDI or trying to change it and manipulate it. And this video is going to give you a very simple approach that I think works pretty well for giving you really a number of pretty musical results and kind of having a better understanding of what you're doing, so you don't feel like you're just randomly smashing buttons and not really getting anywhere with changing and remixing MIDI clips. So here's some MIDI. And a great place to start from is if you have something that's just a basic triad or some basic chords that you blocked in, and maybe even a pretty basic melody, it's a great place to start from. It's very easy to get your hands on MIDI clips too. If you have no idea how to write in melody or find the right notes or play any piano, you can get your hands on a lot of these kinds of MIDI assets. I produced a lot of them over the years. Last year I produced a MIDI pack of over 1,500 assets just like this, all based off of famous chord progressions. So you can get that in a link in the description below, but it's easier to get your hands on something like this, and the more simple it is, the better, actually, I find, with this method. The first thing that's a really useful tip is you can just select all of those notes, and if you go to the fit to scale, it's going to actually change it based on the default scale set to your project. You look up here at the top, mine is actually set to C major. So you can grab a MIDI clip or just random notes, and even if you really don't know what key any of that stuff is in, you can always just hit fit to scale, and it's going to quantize it to that scale. Notice if I hit highlight scale and then scale, you'll notice that all the notes are now falling within that C major scale because that's what it's set to at the top. And so now it's going to sound a bit different. This is a really useful tip if you already have a project with other instrumentation already going on it and you're grabbing MIDI and you're not sure if it's going to fit the right key. You can always quantize it to the key and then clean it up after that. Or if you're trying to take it in a different direction and maybe expand the sound, another really useful tip is to go over to this add interval section. By default, this is set at 0, and if you click and drag up, you're going to notice it's adding something above it automatically. I actually go for 7 because what this does is creates a parallel harmonization of the MIDI notes that you already have, and it gives it more of a wider, expansive sound. And you'll notice that already gives you a bigger sound. You can take this even further and just hit add interval, and it'll keep stacking it up above. It's pretty awesome. It's giving you this kind of big, huge piano planing, kind of, harmonized effect, which, at a certain point is actually impossible to play just by hand, but it's really fun. You can kind of play around with it, do this with synthesizer sounds as well, get a huge polyphonic layering effect. This is oftentimes a great place to actually add in a kick drum or a drum loop, and you can get a lot of inspiration going already from something like this. Now there's a couple of really cool directions you can also take it, especially if you have a lot of MIDI notes now on the screen. I can highlight everything or just hit Command or Control A for select all. And if I go over here to humanize, what this is going to do is kind of break up the attacks of all these MIDI notes. Which you'll notice gives things a very twinkly kind of effect, which can be nice. I can also get rid of that. You notice I go back to a heavier attack sound. You can also do other things, like for instance, if you wanted this to be a little more experimental with that kick in the backdrop, I could select everything, go over to stretch, hold down shift, click, and slowly drag into something that's more like 1 measure long, kind of keeping my eye on that rightmost triangle spot so I can kind of set it right into 1 measure. I can actually bring this loop region back, and now it's going to have a really fast kind of experimental sound. Stretch is cool because it's going to stretch the MIDI notes irrespective of the actual grid. But you can go back in that direction. Again, I'll hit Control A or Command A, select all, and then Control U, and I'll quantize to my grid. So you'll notice how everything now is more musically set back again. I'm in a whole different place musically, but it's working. And I can go over to humanize, hit that again, or undo, set it to 50%. And it always seems to sort of smooth out my attacks, make it more twinkly, or I could go back to a more harsher staccato sound because of the quantization. I could also try this by changing my grid amount. So if I hit Control 1, my grid has gotten smaller. So by hitting Control A or Select All and Control U, I'm going to get a different quantization of all those notes I've stretched or compressed together, and it gives me another different kind of sound. It also tends to change it if you go in the direction of hitting reverse. Because I started with a more musical MIDI clip in this case, this is going to tend to have a more experimental effect yet again. You can hit legato, and that's going to lengthen or shorten the notes based on the grid, and that's again going to change the pattern. And as a general rule of thumb, every time you're manipulating MIDI and it's getting a little too experimental, my general secret is that you want to lengthen the notes or re-quantize them to a larger subdivision of the beat. So if I hit Control 2, my grid is going to go back to a larger subdivision, in this case eighth notes. And I hit Control U, re-quantize. And now it's a little less unwieldy sounding again. And we've created a whole new kind of idea out of just something that was, a basic MIDI clip. Now, of course, this doesn't have to be a piano. This could be a polysynth sound. You could stack on different instruments and presets that you might have in Ableton. I have a ton of stuff in my Drift preset pack. I'll link that down below as well, which is really great because even if you're on Ableton Intro, you still get access to it. You don't have to be on Ableton Standard or Suite. And another cool thing is that when you quantize MIDI or manipulate it into, let's say, this kind of eighth note structure, you could do some things like sound design to really change up the sound. Like for instance, here I have Ableton Echo, and if I just turn this on, its default setting is synced already to eighth notes, but they're dotted. So you can get a really interesting effect just by kind of dialing this in with an eighth note pattern. So if I have an eighth note pattern, I know that dotted is going to give me even more syncopation. And one of the cool things about Ableton is just like the MIDI, where you're kind of taking it in a step-by-step way to get yourself somewhere exciting and different and new while still being kind of in control. Sound design is kind of the same thing in Ableton Live. Like for instance, here we have this cool echoed up piano sound. But I can take it a lot further using a pumping effect with an LFO. I recently did a tutorial on my Patreon about LFOs just in general, because you can use them with synths, but you can also use them with sound design. But first I'm going to grab utility, which is going to allow me to control the gain of that sound, making it quieter if I want to. But the LFO is going to allow me to automate this and make it synced up to the music. So the LFO is right here. I'll drag and drop it in. And all you really want to know about this is I can make it move to the music. So maybe I'll change the shape to something that's ramping down. I'll make it follow the music, hitting this button, and I'll make it following the kick, which is in quarter notes. So I'll drag that to that subdivision. Then all we have to do is hit map and map it to the gain. And in this case, I want to just go back. So I'll hit this button and make sure it's negative 50%. And now this is going to pump to the sound of the kick. I can control the depth or the amount of it and smooth it over to make it a little more musical. So yeah, it's kind of amazing thinking about where we started at the beginning of this video with just a simple MIDI clip. And I feel like just having a better understanding of what those MIDI functions do, how they manipulate the MIDI, you're going to get a more desirable effect and something that's musical and exciting. And it's kind of the same thing with the sound design. I've done a more detailed tutorial on using LFOs, by the way. So if you found that interesting, I'll put that in a link in the description below. The Patreon has a whole vocal production course, tons of stuff on there. You can watch videos ad-free. It's a great way to support the channel. But anyways, I hope this video inspired you guys, gave you some insights. I'll see you in the next one. Have fun making music.